Steve and I were lucky enough to get a chance to head over to Europe, and it's sort of a crystal ball really of seeing what's coming towards us in the future, and how can we put our own Kiwi spin on it. This was a pretty typical forest wood energy, I guess the district energy system site. You had these wood pilings that were mostly from farm sort of clearings, forest clearings, but you also had these sort of piles of slabs that were all bundled up. So they had these bundlers that would just collect the stuff, and so you saw lots of piles of wood waste just sitting on the side of the road that farmers collected up there, and it was all collected up and taken off to the local district energy system. I thought I'd go back a bit further though, and just go back to our nomadic caveman days and go, remember that we all used to gather our fire, and that's how we kept warm, and that led us to using our brain a bit better, and eventually that led us to getting into the discovery of coal, which we had technology bounds, and the Industrial Revolution allowed us to take off, but coal was dirty, it was difficult to handle. Which then led to the oil revolution, and we'd been using oil for quite a while now already. We'd used whale oil, we'd had used vegetable oil, but some smart farmer in Pennsylvania in 1841 found some black stuff bubbling out of the ground, so he decided to see if he could pump it out of the ground, and he was able to. That worked too, but it was expensive now, and it's a limited resource. And I think our caveman friends would be laughing right now that we're now all huddled in a room together talking about wood energy again. But of course this technology has come a long way in those thousands of years. We now understand how to burn the stuff cleanly, efficiently. We've got the handling of it a lot more understood, and we've been doing that for years now. We understand heat recovery and how to dry our fuel as well. So just a bit of a political environment that we're sitting in right now. Steve sort of mentioned that. We talked about the Paris Agreement, and the government in March this year announced that it will be removing the carbon tax over the next 3 years. So that will slowly go, and MFE have done some work already, and at our current stance we're going to have 150 million tonnes of CO2 deficit, which is a cost of $3.75 to $7.5 billion, and this is our carbon price right now. It's as a result of what's happening. Our carbon price is taking off, and it's sort of settled a bit now. This is sort of sitting around $17.90 right now. So that will help wood energy. But is it enough? Can biomass compete with coal? I'd sort of developed this graph here just from known values of prices that we've seen in Southland, and once you start getting out to here, for these large users like Alliance, Fonterra, we're talking serious money to convert from coal to wood chip. We're in the millions of dollars, so the price really needs to get up to about $50 for this to start having an impact on coal. So can it compete right now? It's a tough call for these big users, the alliances, the SCMs. So yeah, it's difficult. We need to get that carbon tax up, or we need to find a cheaper source of wood fuel. So can we produce wood fuels that are cheaper? I guess the biggest surprise that we got when we went over to Europe was the sort of fuel that was going into these boilers. It was absolute rubbish. It was green. It had all sorts of bits and pieces. I think I saw a bit of a jandal in one of them. It was really all sorts. It was really, really surprising. They come from compost rejects. They come from bark, demolition waste. branches, pine needles and compost. There was still a market for high quality fuels like we have here, but that was more aimed at commercial schools, the universities and the likes. These are the sort of prices that they were getting over there. And yeah, so every site I went to, you saw this type of fuel. And one of the sites we went into, there was a tree. It was about 2 to 3 meters long and of about probably 100 mils diameter. It made it all the way to the fuel. It made it all the way through the fuel delivery system and got stuck just before it went into the boiler. You know, they just throw all sorts of rubbish into these boilers and it burns them. This was full of soil. Soil and the fines in that. You wouldn't want to try and measure how much fines was in that supply. And then there was compost as well. So this site had 3 different piles to choose from, and they were all as bad as each other. And they just mixed the 3. They got a scoop out of this pile, a scoop out of that one. They didn't even mix it, they just got dropped into the bunker and it got fed into the boiler. But this pile here was composting, and they had to be quite aware of it not catching on fire. And they had to continually turn it over and make sure that it wouldn't ignite. Yeah, and again, so that was in the $3 to $4 a gigajoule range. So now switching that back to New Zealand, our prices are sitting in that $7 to $15 a gigajoule range, and they're mostly residues from the sawmills and forest landings. And this is a pretty typical fuel that you'll find down here. There's Niagara's stuff, there's some more sawmill chip, green chip. And again, just a typical pile that comes out of the sawmill. Now that might make its way to the MDF plant, but if you're further away, that might make it to cow pads. So that will get used in cow pads a lot. There's quite a lot that goes into cow pads. So there's another source of potential use. Yeah, so I guess from a comparison perspective, if we're going to take our low-grade fuels, if it's going to come from the forest, the cheapest fuel to extract from the forest is the billet wood. Now the billet wood gets collected at a skid site. It's probably the easiest source of wood to grab. And I sort of talked to a couple of the foresters around breaking just a bit of a cost breakdown of how much, of what it costs to get these billet wood out of the forest. You spend about 57% of your costs on carting the wood out of the forest, another 33% in harvesting, and then the forester makes about 10% on that. So this is the stuff that comes up to the skid site. It's really easy to grab, and if you've got the system in place, you can get that removed from the site quite quickly. You can work in quite well with the existing foresting, harvesting sites. So if we start going into, this picture here shows a bundler. Now, I'm not aware if there are bundlers even being used in New Zealand. They sort of go in and scrape the forest floor and grab everything off the bottom and then bundle it up together and send it out. But every time you handle something, it's going to cost you more money. So at the moment, the way our forestry is set up, the easiest and probably the cheapest bit of wood to grab is going to be the billet wood. If we're going to have to go and grab those smaller bits and pieces that are 1 metre long, there's going to be more handling, and so I can't see how we are going to get down to those sort of values at the moment. So can we get it out of the bush? I'm not sure about that, but can we get it from other areas such as landfills or the sawmills, the green waste? What other waste streams are sitting around? Wooden pallets? What will that do? What other waste resources are around that we could be utilising? Dunedin, for example, I'd be interested to see how much hops comes out of the out of the Spates Brewery House. You know, what have we got down here that we could be looking at as another potential biomass source? Because of the quality of their fuel over there, you know, you needed a really sophisticated boiler to burn it. All of their boilers utilised condensing economisers. They reclaimed energy at all different stages of the process. They had great heat recovery, great cooling. They did all sorts of interesting technologies over there, and it's sort of reflected in the type of fuel that they were using. So this is a screenshot of a boiler. This is a Polytechnic boiler, and it isn't very clear to see, but you know, what you can see in here is our temperatures. So we're getting 600, 800, and then up here we're getting our 900 degree temperatures. So we're getting our highest temperatures in our secondary combustion, nowhere near the flames. And then we're doing our work, and you know, what I find interesting is following this temperature profile back through the exhaust system. You know, from here we're getting into 200 degree temperatures. We go through an economizer, we've dropped down to 150. So they'll use this for pre-drying something. They'll use it for doing some work on the grate. They might even use it for pre-drying the air coming into the system. You know, they might even do something with the fuel. We follow that again, 140, 122, and we're coming out of the stack at 41 degrees. So you can actually put your hand on the stack. And they'll do that, they'll use that anywhere. They'll use this for all different parts of the process. There's a heat recovery here that comes off this part of the system, and that goes in and heats the grates. Preheats the air, it does all sorts of stuff. So just on that last section between here and this end section here, they grabbed 380 kilowatts of low-grade energy at 70 degrees and used that in another process. But there's a price to pay for that technology, and it was about €5 million for a 6 megawatt boiler, and that was in a dairy factory. So yes, you know, they're using the technology for that awful fuel. You know, we've got high-grade fuels at the moment in New Zealand, and you know, the boilers we've got are our Scott Andersons, our Tamac, our Rayners boilers, and we're really limited with what you can put through those types of boilers. We're limited with the moisture content that you can put through them. And for large industrial consumers, you know, a seasoned product isn't an option. It has to be a green product sheerly for the volume. You won't be able to season large volumes and store them in those types of volumes. But it can be done, and we've got a great working example of it in Invercargill. And Wayne isn't unfortunately here today, but as Steve said, he is one of our early adopters, and he's been a pioneer and a bit of a big light for us for the project. What Wayne has done is he's managed to convert a VCOS boiler across to operate on wood chip, and he can do that because we've got a high quality fuel stock available in Southland. It's dry, it's reasonably low cost, and we're using that technology. That's 4.5 megawatts there. So going back to the other boiler, €5 million. I don't know what it cost Wayne to do this, but I'm guessing he did it for about $500,000 to do this whole technology here with an old boiler. Wayne's done some other interesting things with his flues. He sprays his laundry water into his flue, and if we did a temperature profile through this, it would be very similar to the other boiler, and I can put my hand on that flue at the top and no, I'm not going to burn myself. So he does some very interesting things in his system as well. but it's got its limitations. There's no way we could throw $6 a gigajoule fuel through it. We'd be really limited. Other applications we saw while we were over there, there was every system we saw, we went to 11 systems, there were district heating in 60% of them. We happened to be driving to the site when we saw this going down. This was going into a kindergarten that was getting installed, and they were just taking off the district heating loop and feeding the kindergarten. This was a tiny town of 6,000 people. And they had 2 boilers down there. They'd set up for additional capacity with the ability to add another boiler as the system got bigger. When you sort of overlaid the map of the town over the actual network, which I was hoping I could do, I didn't really get a chance to. There was still a lot of businesses that weren't covered in there, but this gives you an idea of the sort of spread of their system, of where it was feeding. Can we do something like that in Invercargill? We've got some large boilers in town, and this is just some of them. We haven't highlighted all of them on here. We've got about 40, those sites there represent about 40 megawatts. We also saw a lot of electricity generation in those sites, and I won't really talk much about that, but it was definitely in probably 40% of all the sites that we looked at had electricity generation attached to it as well. Some of the other interesting technologies we saw were just the emissions control. They had a lot of monitoring, and this power plant / district heating system we saw in Düsseldorf, this was actually a screenshot that got sent over to the local district council, and if at any time the council wasn't happy with what they saw, there was a button there that they could push and it would shut down this power plant. So there was a real stick there to, if you don't keep your emissions clean, we've got the power to shut you down at any time. This was more interesting than anything really. It was just a depluming device that if you didn't like seeing the steam coming out of your stack, they came up with technology that got rid of that. It didn't improve anything, but it got rid of the plume, and we thought, oh yeah, this is it when it was off. It was on when we got there, so they turned it off for us, and sure enough, up comes the plume, and within about 5 minutes, when they turned it back on, it was gone again. This was a ski town, and they just didn't like the visualness of it. It probably cost another $1 million on the project, but that was the technology they had. We also saw how they were pre-drying their product. They were storing it in sheds, and they were using heat recovery off the flue gas. They built grates into the ground, and these piles were about 1 metre high, and that's 12 metres long, that whole area there. So they put in 1 metre high, dried it, added another metre on top of it, dried it, and then they fed that into their boiler using all of their waste heat. Just a clever idea. I know Otago University are also doing similar things, trying to preheat their chip, pre-dry it, I mean. And I guess it makes, if you're buying it at a less rate, you're actually adding energy to it, and it's worth more without having to pay for that. Last slide, just a summary of where we're at. The political environment is there for the change that will benefit biomass. Our fuel's now $7 to $15. Can we get down to $5 to $6? It may be possible from other waste streams of poor quality, but then we need the technology to be able to burn this. And yes, New Zealand boilers, coal boilers can be converted to biomass, but the quality of the fuel really determines, is the really limiting factor for that.